Hey everybody, we're going to do a little nymph pattern from Fran Betters called the Piggyback Nymph. And it's a little two-parter here. You first have to make a little indicator ball. This is a precursor to the Parasol nymphs, or actually I'm not sure on the timing. Maybe it's not a precursor, maybe it's in line with it. But he says to cut off a clump of white deer hair and about a 1/4 inch. I like to kind of use most of the whole length, get rid of the fluff and the shorts in the bottom, and then kind of bunch it all together and even up the tips and cut it so it's kind of close to my fingers there. And then I'm taking some thread here. This is a 110 denier, so a little bit thicker thread. I kind of drop it between my thumb and finger there and kind of do a pinch and loop around there, and you wrap it. He says, slowly getting stronger, about 10 to 11 wraps of thread around to flare the deer hair out. I don't think I end up doing that many, but you could go ahead and do that many, and then cut that extra with some length there behind. I leave the long ends there for now, and you can just pull the two ends to get it really tight, and then just do a bunch of overhand knots, just like you would on your shoelaces. Do two or three to cinch it down there into that slot. And this is going to be your float or indicator device that you're going to kind of attach to the nymph. Fran talks about developing this pattern sort of, in the beginnings when he was still in high school, noticing that at times of the year, trout were sipping nymphs very close to the surface, just a few inches below the surface. And he didn't find, using a bobber or a float was an effective way to do that, because you then had to set the hook through the bobber, and most of the time he didn't get the fish at that point in time. So tie two or three down, cut one of those ends off, and leave one on there, and then you can kind of shape this ball to any size you want. So back to the story, he basically figured he needed another way. He needed to kind of create a mini bobber that he would, in the tying process, in the development of the nymph, tie onto the nymph. That way his tippet would be directly tied to the nymph, yet it would still be floating just a little bit below the surface, a few inches below the surface. And there are many of these sort of parasol patterns out there. I've seen some from Central Europe that use CDC. There's a French pattern called the ombrelle. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. Try to pretend to use some French there, but that's the general idea, and doing the sort of same thing as Fran is here. To ensure that floats, I like to use a little watershed. It's a product from Hairline. You could use any of those kind of waterproofing sprays that you put on clothes and shoes and stuff like that. Those are also very effective waterproofing agents, and to waterproof your materials ahead of time. And that's it to create that little ball. And then I'm going to use a nymph hook here, size 14. Fran says olive thread for the basic nymph he uses, well waxed. And that's Bailey's wax there is my favorite wax. And possum is going to be both the dubbing and the tail material, and a little bit of foam, again, to kind of help hang that nymph just below the surface, and of course that little float device you made there. And that's not tied on tippet. You could do a really limp nylon. Fran preferred using tying thread, because it would give a little bit better of a dead drift and not have the tippet drive the fly too much or steer it. So just cut a little piece of possum off my possum hank there and got rid of the under fur and tying the guard hairs in as the tail. He says to tie it in short, so I did a couple loose wraps there and just pulling it to length. And I'm going to trim off that waist. And then you're going to add a little bit of wire, which I forgot to mention in the beginning. So some very extra small copper wire there to make the abdomen thin and ribbed. So we'll tie that in now. And the body is going to be made with that possum fur, light tannish color to it. And I'm going to dub a thin, narrow abdomen that goes about halfway up the hook shank. And then we're going to wrap the rib, which is the wire. You want to be able to see the wire and to really tighten down, bite down into and narrow that body, that abdomen of the nymph. And we'll helicopter that off. And then now you're going to tie in your little deer hair float here at the halfway mark. The shortest you want to do it is about 1 inch. So you need to leave 1 inch of tying thread there. You could go, anywhere in the, I would say, probably not more than 4 inches. But, somewhere between 1 and 3 maybe is a good length. This is like just at 1 inch, and I would tie it a little bit longer. But just to keep everything in the frame so you see what's going on. And then tie in a little bit of black foam here. And now you're going to make, again, with the Australian possum, the same exact color, but a much thicker, bigger, bushier thorax zone here. Get it nice and thick, and that whole area covered. And then bring that foam over. You could also use a natural material here if you don't want to use the foam. You could use turkey, you could use pheasant tail to make that wing case. It's interesting that Fran settled on foam. So as the story goes in Fran's book, he actually wrote an article about this pattern that he submitted for publication, and it was denied. I guess it was he was a little too ahead of his time at that time, and later resubmitted pretty much the same article, and it eventually got published. The magazines were open to the idea at a little bit later of a time. And then you can always, you can fiddle with the size of this little deer hair indicator ball. But I'm just going to use my whip finish there to kind of show you the nymph, and it's going to hang below that guy. And this way you can see the indicator, and here's kind of another picture of it close up. And here's it in a glass with a longer, tying thread portion, so you can kind of see how the deer hair floats up at the top. And here I've connected it to tippet to kind of show the drift, and how the tippet's gonna, with the foam there at the front, is gonna make it angle up a little bit. And give that one a go. The Genius Fran. All right, take care. Thank you. Bye.